capacity that you have within Singapore to actually deliver on good quality plans, and then the implementation, so the resources that you had to implement, how much of your plan of 1991 actually got realized on the ground? So that's my first question, which is related to resources. The second one is related to what is the role, or what has been the role during your journey? What was the role of government, so the leadership in government? What was the role of the specialists, the planning specialists and the design specialists and the engineering specialists? And what was the role of people in terms of participation in the plan itself? Because this is something that we repeatedly, when we heard earlier, I mean, how much of the plan should have inputs from the people? Is it more, as you said, is it only about communicating the plan, or in a structure like India, which is democracy, what is the role of the people and where does it come into the planning process itself? And the last one is on in terms of the market forces, and that's a very important one. What is the role of the plan, of the master plan, in generating the kind of confidence of market players that the plan will get realized, and also in actually helping them in making their business do better? So what was the role of planning in that?
Okay, first of all, I have to say that, to answer your first question, that we should not forget the legacy left behind by the British colonial government. They did leave behind a master plan, although it's kind of very English kind of master plan, lots of landed properties and so on. But at least there was a foundation for us to build upon. And when we became independent, the majority of us Singaporeans the average age was very, very low. In fact, when I went back to Singapore in 1969, I was around 31. And all the people working for me were in their early 20s. So we were just a bunch of very, very young people. So, and I was given this big responsibility to do the new town plan for public housing. So I told myself that it's too dangerous for me to rely on my instinctive reaction. So I did a couple of things. One is that every time I face a problem, I would organize a team of people, a small team of people, to research from books or to interview people in order to find the answer. For example, the fact that we came to the conclusion that an HDB new town in the Singapore context should have a population size of plus or minus 200,000 people was the work of a year of research to do that. So after that, I felt confident that we would not just go by gut feel, go by instinct. We have some basis, and in fact, after knowing the basis, we'll continue to monitor those bases as we implemented and kept improving the plans. So first is that we must really take our job seriously and collect data, do research. Second is that because we still have to build in huge quantity, so one of the things we did was that we create prototype new town model. We created prototype neighborhood model. We created prototype precinct model. We even created prototype building block model, prototype floor plan model. And then we would make amendments only when we get feedback, and then everybody sit down together and make the amendment. And it's not entrusted to any one of the young architecture engineers, nor to me, even though I was relatively older than them. So here, I think there's an important message, is that if you want to build in quantity, you want to build well, try to look at prototypes, but aspire to create this prototype which is of world class. And for example, one of the reasons that you go to Singapore, you feel that it is a garden city, it's because we spent a lot of time creating the prototype of a road section, for different classes of roads, and make sure that along every street, there are tree planting on both sides. There are exceptions, but you have to apply for exceptions for good reasons. So there's a kind of, to maintain high standard, don't hesitate to create high standard prototypes. And because once you have a prototype and you treat those as if you use the language as example, these prototypes are like the grammar of the language. But when you use a prototype, it's like using the grammar. You still have to apply the usage of grammar with your own vocabularies, your own, and also the consideration of the person you communicate with. So don't hesitate, don't worry about the rigidity of prototype. In fact, Singapore has shown to you that it's possible to do that. That's the first question. That's first. The second one about the sharing, communication, and so on. I would say I'm a kind of hardliner on this, frankly. I personally feel that certainly until like end of last century, Singaporeans were, first of all, particularly in the beginning, Singaporeans were not very well educated. One of the key initiative that the government was pushing is to ensure that everybody would have at least primary school education. That's where we started. In fact, it was illegal not to let your children go to study until he graduates from primary school. That's where we started. It became a law. And then, but now, of course, this is no longer an issue, but we should not forget where we started. So in those days, it is absolutely necessary for the politicians and the planners and engineers to really think through clearly what are the right things to do and then put into the plan. Because if you go and ask for citizens' participation, you will get almost nothing. In fact, I'll tell you one story just to illustrate that. Around early 80s, because I actually engaged about 12 sociologists, among others, with PhD degree to advise me on how to build in the sociological community concept into the hardware, into the brick and mortar. And one day they decided to do a survey, among many others, because at one stage we built our public housing block in two basic types. One is a staircase shared by 2 units on each side. Another one is just a huge long corridor, and people just live along the corridor. So they wanted to find out which prototype is preferred. So after they put a lot of effort in and then say, okay, we're ready to go to a survey. I said, okay, thanks very much. But before you go, I want to say one thing. I already know the result. They said, what do you mean? I said, those who live in one single staircase, they will opt for that. Those who live along long corridor will opt for that as a preferred mode. And my staff was very upset with me. How could I be so arrogant? Anyway, a few weeks later, I said, Mr. Liu, you're right. That's exactly the result. He said, how do you know? I said, I know, because it's hard for people to imagine a life they're not familiar with. And we have to be careful about that. We have to be careful about overuse of citizen participation. I think it's better that we take the responsibility to get the thing done right and explain the reason to the people. But nevertheless, keep an open mind to listen to their feedback. But if we are going to abdicate our responsibility and only listen to the people's feedback, I feel that you're going to be sorry. In fact, when I was a CEO of HDB, the most common request to me as a CEO from the resident was that we need a bus stop in front of my block. Please put the bus stop, but not in front of my house, in front of other people's house. Okay, I mean, this is kind of feedback I got. Okay, so this is the second answer. The third What?
Leadership. I mean, what did you need in terms of leadership from governments?
Leadership is important. You see, the achievement of Singapore, as you saw, I would say that the most critical part is political leadership. That's why just now you saw my diagram, the planning universe. The will to excel, and the will to be open-minded, and the will to be rational are extremely important. In fact, I sometimes say to people that the highest authority in Singapore is not the Prime Minister, it's the abstract concept called logic, rationality. Nobody would define that. Even the Prime Minister would not define that. I used to have to go on a walking tour with Mr. Lee Kuan Yew about 3 or 4 times a year. And along the tour, you make all kinds of suggestions. The good one, I said, yes, okay, I'll follow up. Occasionally, he'll come up with something that I didn't think was a good idea. So I said, sorry. I said, I don't think it's a good idea for the following reason. And he would accept on the spot. This is the kind of leadership we had. And so the higher leadership is not the Prime Minister. It's this logic, rationality. And
The last one was on the implementation and the role of the plan for energizing investment in the city.
yeah. And of course, I give you those 4 suggestions. And they're all related to political leadership, like creating a kind of very good planning process. I couldn't have created just as a planner. The government did that. Okay, to have the will, to have the right strategies and vision before I could take over. Well, you need the starting point. You must have good leadership.
The land and the money, how did that come about? You know, one of the earlier panels the panelist was mentioning how land became a contentious issue.
Yeah, I think a lot of things that Singapore could do in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and even early 90s, if we were to introduce it now, those measures now in Singapore would have been much harder. So this is another quality of leadership, and that is the government introduced legislation by reading the political situation very, very clearly, and introduced a legislation while it was still possible to be introduced. For example, just to give an idea, as we felt that it was becoming around the late 70s, early 80s, it was becoming harder to do resettlement work. So the government said, okay, let's give a big push to clear all the squatters. Just one statement to me like this. So that's in early 80s. So by 1983, 84, basically all the squatters disappeared. We just pushed them into public housing. In fact, in 1983, in 1 year, we completed 62,000 units of apartments. But we could have done more, but we tried to pull it up gradually and let it go down gradually, in order not to create stress to the construction industry or creating sudden unemployment to the contractor. So all these things must be thought through. So I would say timely introduction of policy was a feature in Singapore, anticipating the need of the people before the problems arise was one of the strengths of Singapore's government. And that made our job seem to be rather painless, but actually it's a very clever way to do it. Yeah.